Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and tuning into our IGNet webinar on digital security for journalists. As reporters and media professionals working all over the world, I'm sure many of you have experienced firsthand the tightening restrictions on press freedoms in recent years. We're operating in an increasingly hostile environment today, and being up to date on best practices to protect our data and that of our colleagues and sources is more important than ever. In addition, these days as we quarantine during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, many of us are working from home, relying almost entirely on the internet. I'm David Moss, the manager of IGNet, and I'm going to introduce our expert guests in just a moment. Before we do, I want to give a brief rundown of how this session will work. We've collected questions from participants ahead of time, which will be incorporated into the discussion. If you have any additional questions for our panelists, you can submit them through the chat function at the bottom of your screen, on Facebook under the live video stream, or on Twitter using the hashtag IGNetLive. We'll also make this video available after the webinar ends, and we'll be publishing a recap in the coming days. Finally, while this webinar is on the record, we ask that you reach out if you'd like to quote them in any article following today's event. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Rajan Kapoor. He is the Director of Security at Dropbox in San Francisco, California. Past positions he held at Dropbox include Head of Data Security and Senior Manager of Trust and Security. Before joining Dropbox, Rajan held a series of posts at the intersection of technology and security, including a 5-year stint as the Director of Information Technology with the Eurasia Group. He's joined by Sérgio Spagnuolo, who's based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Sérgio is a former ICFJ TruthBuzz Fellow and the head of data journalism agency and consultancy Volt Data Lab. Previous positions Sérgio has held include as editor of the Brazilian fact-checking website Aos Fatos and roles with Reuters and Yahoo News. Sérgio is also a former ICFJ Fellow for the program A Digital Path to Entrepreneurship and Innovation for Latin America. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you two for some opening remarks before we turn to questions. Rajan, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today and giving us an opportunity to talk to you about securing your collaboration and your data. As David said, the environment today is uniquely challenging when it comes to security, and the press is more important than ever, in my opinion. Having a free and open press is something that, as we're dealing with the crises unfolding around the world, critical to getting factual information out to everyone. So I'm just happy to be here to help facilitate that in any way that I can, and I hope that you walk away from today's session with a better understanding of how you can continue to report and do the great work that you do, and be confident that you're doing it in a secure way.
Hi, thanks very much for inviting me. I appreciate David's invitation and Rajan's support for doing this webinar. Also IGNet and ICFJ. As a journalist for many years, I came to understand that digital security is very, very important for journalists to work. And fortunately, in the past few years, a lot of good tools came up to the market, a lot of free stuff as well, but a lot of paid, secure tools that we can rely on to do our reporting, to share documents, to really create a safe environment for us to work. And I hope that we can give you guys some lay of the land here, so you can just jump on it and do some reporting without having to worry too much about who is trying to tap your communications and documents, and do all of those stuff securely.
Great. Awesome. Thank you both. All right. So first, I want to throw out a question that came up several times actually from participants before, over the weekend when we asked for questions. And these all touched on data breaches, loss of data, and passwords. So on this note, what are some general password security tips you have for our viewers?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with this one. You want to make sure you're doing a couple of things when it comes to passwords. You want to make sure you're not reusing passwords across services. So if you're using the same password for your email service that you're using for some forum that you log into on a smaller site, you're putting yourself at risk. If an attacker is able to, and we see this, if an attacker reaches a site and is able to exfiltrate usernames and passwords, they go to all of the major cloud service providers immediately, and they try and reuse the usernames and passwords that they have and see if someone's reused their password, and then they can get into your account. So making sure you use unique passwords. I use a password manager. I use 1Password. I highly recommend using some sort of password manager so that you don't have to remember your passwords and you can make them fairly complex. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. You want to back up your password with something called two-factor authentication. So even if your password is compromised, attackers won't be able to access your accounts. And again, we'll come back to that later on. So that's just some good password hygiene rules to follow.
Yeah, Edward Snowden, the NSA famous leaker, he had some good password tips as well for journalists specifically, but not specifically, but for everyone. It's just create long, easy to remember names. For instance, you can take the first sentence of any song and put some special characters in there, for instance, and use all caps for some part of the password, and also special characters like commas or dashes or whatever. So one way to secure a password is that it should be long. You know, not long enough that you won't remember, but pretty long, like over 10 characters, I would say. So you have like a really strong password. We tried, me and a friend, force breaking out password once. When we used 6-character passwords, we could break it like in matter of hours using force entry, you know. When we upped that for 7, it took us a day, and for 8 we couldn't break. We didn't have like the energy to go to wait days for it to break. So you should try to use like longer password. That would be. And of course, as Rajan said, you should definitely use 2-factor authentication, especially for those services you use the most and rely the most, like messaging services and document services. So 2-factor authentication is very, very useful for that.
All right, thank you. And a follow-up to this, one question we received is, how do I reinforce my encryption against attackers? So I guess just very basically for our viewers, what is encryption and when do you need it?
Sure. So encryption is the concept of taking your data, taking a file, and scrambling it using a key. With most service providers, with every service provider, what you want to look for is at least 2 things: encryption in transit. That means the data is encrypted when it leaves your device, going to the cloud service provider as it travels across the internet, and encryption at rest on the provider's services. That means the provider's encrypting the data when they store it for you. Those are basically table stakes. And specifically, you want to look for AES 256-bit encryption. That's standard at this point. When you're on a website, you'll know it's encrypted. You'll know your data is encrypted going back and forth. If you look for in most browsers, it's like a green lock or just a lock icon, and the URL starts with HTTPS. That's a secure protocol for transferring data. So look for your service provider talking about encryption in transit and at rest, and confirm that the website you're on is actually encrypted. For your most sensitive data, you also want to explore encrypting the data yourself. Not all data is created equal. Some data is okay just to rely on the service provider to encrypt, but certain data, certain files, you might want to encrypt yourself when you store them locally on your laptop. I recommend something called full disk encryption for your devices. And this means that it's something that's built into Mac OS and something that's built into Windows OS. You turn it on and the files on your hard drive are scrambled. So if someone were to get access to your laptop or your hard drive, they wouldn't be able to look at the data that's on there. On an iOS device, like an iPhone, if you turn on passcodes to your phone, the phone automatically encrypts the data that's on it. So that's something I recommend as well. I believe this is true with modern Android devices as well. Make sure you have a passcode on your mobile and tablet devices. I don't know, Sergio, is there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, full disk encryption is really necessary. Just make sure you don't lose your password, otherwise you'll never be able to retrieve the data, right? And there's a good question here from Marty Benak, and he's asking about existing about passwords suggested by browsers. And I think this is a really good question because we tend to save our passwords there. I don't recommend that very much because, you know, it's basically open. Of course, you can go to Chrome settings and go to password, saved passwords, and you're gonna be locked outside. You know, you need your password or usually your computer password to access those passwords in there. But usually I recommend you really keep your passwords in a safe place. The way I do it, I use an encrypted file, 228 bits encryption that have one master password. And inside that document, I have all my passwords. It's probably not the most convenient way as Bitwarden or 1Password. But I keep this file synced between my phone and my computer, and it's pretty handy for me. It's free, so there's that as well. And also, I have index search in there and all this kind of stuff. So I never forget my password, and I don't rely on one service. If Rajan stopped paying 1Password, for instance, he should transfer his passwords to another service or to another form of keeping his password. So I like doing this encryption method that I can tell you guys more about later if you want.
Awesome. So I want to move on to VPNs now. A question we got from a participant was, I work for a large media organization. Can I assume our VPNs are secure, or are there other precautions I should be taking to ensure my firewall is not compromised? So could you just go into what VPNs are exactly and some best practices around them?
Yes. So VPNs are virtual private networks. And mostly what they do is they serve as a middleman between your computer and someone else's server. So if you're gonna go to YouTube to watch a video there, usually your computer, your IP address connects to YouTube's IP address, and YouTube's IP address gives you their video to your screen, to your browser. What the VPN does, it stands in the middle between your computer and YouTube server. So once your connection goes to this this middleman, which is the VPN, nobody else can track where you're going after that. So the only one who knows is the VPN server itself, right? It knows your IP connection. For instance, David's connection is going to their server and is going out to YouTube. So nobody else can know that. And YouTube don't know that you're watching YouTube as well, you, David, right? So that's a very interesting way to keep your privacy browsing online. A lot of people, I use a lot of VPNs for accessing government websites because I download a lot of data and I do my best not to crash any website. Actually, I do a good job not crashing any government website, but sometimes they block my IP address because I download a lot of data. I'm not sure if they want that. So what I do is I use VPN, and I can change the VPN IP that I'm gonna use every time, so I don't use the same IP address, and they don't track me. So yeah, I should mention that VPNs are good tools to mask your IP address, but they are not necessarily privacy protectors, right? because there are some ways that people can exploit them and use them. And of course, you need to use good VPN services. There are a few that I'm going to mention later in this webinar, but make sure you use check your VPN providers online to see if they are good, they have good ratings, and if they are really trustworthy, that you can really mask your IP address without nobody knowing. And don't put too much confidence in free VPN. Even if they're good enough, they only secure half of the way most of the time. So yeah, try your best if you have some budget. It costs like $4 a month, maybe, or $3 maybe, some of them. So they're good tools to mask your IP, but they're not necessarily the ones keeping privacy all the time. Encryption, I think, is the only thing that absolutely can keep your privacy.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Sérgio said there, VPNs, what they do is they will prevent anyone from eavesdropping on your traffic, right? So if you are communicating with a service provider, you want to make sure that no one in between you and the service provider is looking at your data. VPNs are great, but like Sérgio said before, it is not a bulletproof way for protecting your privacy. If your service provider is hostile or trying to track you, they can still do that with things like cookies. If your device is compromised with malware, it can still see what you're doing. VPNs are really, really good though if you're operating in like a hostile environment where you think a government agency, or if you think some other organization might have a position that they can look at what you're sending. A hotel is a great example of this. If you're working from a hotel network, it is really easy to get a position as an attacker on that hotel network and just siphon off all the data going across it. If you're using a VPN, the attacker won't be able to see what you were doing. So VPNs are great when you're on untrusted networks and want to just make sure your data is only going to the place it should be going to.
Yeah, just one little note after that is a good thing that you mentioned that there's no one panacea, that will make you secure all the time. So it's a set of things you use. It's a mix of VPN, of not accessing harmful websites, of cleaning your browser or using a very secure browser to navigate. And there's a set of good practices and tools that you have to use. It's like VPN alone is very useful, but it's not the only tool that can help you keep your privacy.
Yeah. And to Sérgio's point, there's a lot of sketchy VPN providers out there who actually have designed their service just to mine your data. Sérgio's going to recommend a couple of VPN providers later on in his list of tools. Highly recommend you go with something that is vouched for, and don't just go onto the app stores and download some VPN tool that you've never heard of before.
Yeah, that's a good note. All right, so a lot of our viewers today are likely journalists working all over the world, and one thing they have in common is that they're trying to communicate with their sources, colleagues around some potentially sensitive information, a story that they're working on. So on this note, we got a question from one of our participants that goes, how can we safeguard ourselves and maintain privacy in a lockdown when all the discussions are on digital platforms? I guess this is especially the case now, during COVID-19, we're all quarantining. So could you guys go into some of these messaging apps, communication platforms that you'd recommend for keeping your data and information secure?
Yeah, sure. I can kick this off and then I'll hand it off to you, Sérgio. Yeah. So it is challenging, right? When you have government agencies and other actors trying to get to your data. There's a couple of things you want to do. The first is you want to work with reputable services. You want to make sure that you're working with a service that has a good track record, has a clear and easy to understand privacy policy, that you completely understand what they're doing with your data. And there's most companies in the US, the most large cloud organizations in the US today have something called a transparency report, where they will publish the number of government requests that they get for data, that, via subpoenas, via just different legal actions, or warrants coming to them. What they can't tell you about are national security letters that they get in the U.S. And these are, they're basically, there's gag orders in place where you cannot talk about national security letters that you get and who's targeted in those. But if it's standard law enforcement, they can. And then just being thoughtful about the data that you are putting with these service providers. I mentioned self-encrypting files that you find that you think are very sensitive. If you self-encrypt a file before you upload it to a service provider, no one will be able to access that data unless they come to you and get the key from you. One of the things we do at Dropbox is we're very thoughtful and about storing our customers' data. We consider ourselves custodians of your data. We are not the owners of your data. And so if we do get a legal, some sort of legal request for your data, we will ask the requester to go to you and go to you directly so that they can't do an end run around your due process. And so you want to look for that. You want to look for companies that have taken a strong stance on privacy and aren't monetizing your data. Sergio?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, especially for peer-to-peer communication, right? Usually if you're gonna do like a webinar or have multiple people, over 10 people in a call, privacy is not the same thing as one-on-one conversation or email. When I was working for a startup company here in Brazil, I was doing some research about what's the best, most secure email provider I could find. So I went after G Suite from Google. I went after some very notorious kind of email providers. And the best one I found was ProtonMail, which use end-to-end encryption for messages. It encrypts your message going out of the server. So it's very secure. Like, even if they are subpoenaed by the government, all they're gonna handle the government, it's a bulky file, all encrypted, a lot of special characters and stuff people don't understand without a key, so that's how encryption works. You need keys to unlock it. So if you're doing some very sensitive kind of reporting and you do need to secure your communication in every way possible, you need to use encryption and make sure that services that provide that services for you, like the companies that provide that services for you, don't have the access to the actual content of your message. Pretty sure Dropbox has something like that, and ProtonMail has it, and Signal, for instance, has as well, like the message app Signal. So make sure that the compliance of the companies who are doing that are in line with the stuff you're looking for.
You mentioned Signal. Would that be your top recommendation for messaging apps?
Yeah, for sensitive stuff, yeah. I mean, Signal is pretty good, but it's kind of messy. It doesn't have the best layout. It's not like a Swift or a WhatsApp, for instance, but it's definitely the most secure. So of course, if I'm doing something that requires me to send some auto-destroying message that will expire in 5 hours or 1 hour or 1 week or whatever, I'm definitely going to use Signal. It's the most secure way. But if I'm doing my day-to-day communication, I use other methods. I use Slack a lot. I use WhatsApp. Telegram is secure as well. So it depends on what you want to do, and how sensitive is the message you want to send people.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to work with a lot of security forward people in my industry. So Signal's become kind of the de facto messaging app that we use. But to Sergio's point, it's not, it's not integrated like iMessages into your iOS device, or WhatsApp is into, your Android and iOS devices. But as more and more people get on there, it's becoming easier to use it for messages. And Signal is absolutely trustworthy when it comes to securing your data. I also recommend beyond messaging apps, if you're having voice conversations, if you're having a sensitive voice conversation, some of these apps, Signal is one of them, will offer audio services. They're not going to be as good in all cases as say using your cell phone, using the cellular network, but it will encrypt your audio traffic and prevent you from being eavesdropped on. I actually also, for private conversations that I'm not, that are kind of like, I look for mid-level security, FaceTime has FaceTime audio, WhatsApp has audio. It basically helps you stay off the traditional phone networks, which are very easy to tap into and intercept if you're a government agency, and encrypts your voice traffic between you and your caller.
Yeah, just coming back to Signal a little bit, there's some funny thing that used to happen to Signal. It doesn't happen to me anymore because what I do something to keep that from happening, but I'm not sure if it happened to other people. But at first, when I started using Signal on my phone, after a few months, I downloaded the desktop app for my computer, and it just wouldn't load all the messages because I had so many messages. So make sure if you're using the phone and the desktop Signal app, you open either one of those every week or so. So you download all the messages. Otherwise, it's gonna download a lot of stuff that you won't even remember that it's there, but it's clogging your traffic there. So it's So make sure you use Signal frequently on both platforms if you're trying them.
All right, yeah, that's a good point. And so kind of building off this, journalists today are collaborating more and more, and ideally will do so even more, going into the future. So what are some tools that reporters can use to ensure that they, collaborate safely without compromising their data?
Yeah, Sergio, you want to take this first, and then I can hop in.
What kind of tools do you mean?
So like best practices to ensure that reporters, when they are collaborating, that they do so safely.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start talking about Google Docs, which is pretty much the default application for a lot of journalists that I know, especially, but I'm sure a lot of people use Google Docs. And one of the things I see a lot everywhere is people write a sensitive story, for instance, and they create a Google Doc with their account, and they just open that document for edits for everyone with the link. So that's not a very good, it's not that this is not a very good practice, this is a bad practice. So if you open your document for everyone with the link, you're gonna make sure that's the final version, that it doesn't have any source name or contact or whatever thing that can compromise a source or your reporting at all. So usually when you're gonna, and Rajan will talk more about Dropbox paper, which is a very neat solution for document sharing, but I'm speaking specifically about Google Docs, which is very common as well. So make sure you only share your document, especially with editing privilege, to people you trust and that have a proper account with Google or whatever, right? So don't just share links, URL with people. I know it's sometimes it's boring and, oh man, I gotta ask this person for their email, I'm gonna find their email and I'm gonna share with them. And if they're using their cell phone and don't have access to their proper email, it's gonna take some time to edit the story so they can see my text and whatever. But it's usually not a very good practice to just share open URL with your reporting. You can compromise your reporting somehow. If it leaks to other people or government institution or whatever, you can compromise whatever you're doing. So try to keep your documents as private as possible, right?
And some best practices here are, basically think about how sensitive your data is. You want to turn on password protection, right, for data that you're sharing, so that only the person you intend to view it is viewing it. You want to expire data. If you're sharing something with a link, set it to expire after a certain amount of time. One thing you really don't want to use is start sharing accounts. In other words, setting up one account and you have the same password between multiple people, because then you just don't know if that account's been compromised and someone else is logging in. But like Sergio said, I can go into some best practices with Dropbox that illustrate some of this. So what I'm going to do now is, if we're ready for this, I'll share my screen and start walking through. And what I'm going to walk through here is, yes, specific to Dropbox, but it is also applicable to other services out there. You'll just have to figure out how to implement these controls on the different services that you're using. So I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can see it. You see a Dropbox login here. First thing I'm going to do is log in. I mentioned 1Password before. I actually don't know what my login is for this site because I had 1Password generate a unique random password for me. And then it has a browser integration. So I just come in here and choose the account I'm logging into. It auto-populates my username and password, and I'm going to sign in. Again, I actually don't know what the password is that I've chosen here because I let 1Password do it for me. So I've signed in. One thing you're going to notice is I'm using a browser called Brave browser. Sergio he has this in his list of tools to use to work securely online. Highly recommend Brave browser for protecting yourself. So I'm going to start with account security here. There's two things that you want to do. You want to secure your account and you want to secure your data. Account security basically just means you want to make sure that only someone who is authorized to access your account, has access to it. And anyone who's not authorized, the rest of the world, can't get access to it. So you start off with, like I said, a strong and unique password, and you don't reuse passwords. That's the first thing to do. The second thing you want to do is come in, and we talked about two-factor authentication or two-step verification. The concept of two-step verification is a basic one. The password is something that you use to log in. Two-step verification couples something you have with that. So whether it's a code that gets sent to you or a hardware token that you tap on your laptop, it is basically a way of backing up your password. So if your password is ever compromised, the attacker still can't get into your service without that second factor. I'm going to turn this on here to get started. First, it'll ask me for my password. Again, I have no idea what that is, so let me copy it from the password manager. Paste it in here. Now, we have a couple of options. Use text messages or use a mobile app. Personally, I recommend using a mobile app. There's a lot of risk, especially in other countries, around your cell phone number being taken away from you using something called SIM swapping. Basically, an attacker can get a cell phone company to erroneously hand over your account to them. So now they can intercept all your text messages. They can, basically leverage your two-factor codes. So I'm going to use a mobile app and click next. It gives me a barcode. And so if you have an authentication app, there's a number of them out there. I use one from a company called Duo, and I trust their services. So I'm going to add this. So it asks me to scan a code. So basically, I'm going to scan this code. And now what you'll see here is I hope you guys can all see this. There's a code that pops up under my Dropbox account for this username. I'm asked for this code, and this is what I will see the next time I log in. I will put in my password, and I'll be asked for this code that I've generated off of my phone, and I plug in, and now I can log in. Highly, 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 highly recommend that you whatever backup methods they give you here, that you take. And I'm just going to stop sharing for a second so I don't share my cell phone number with everyone. But I highly recommend whatever backup options you are provided for two-factor authentication, you take them, because if you don't, you will get locked out of your account. I'm going to start sharing again here and show you what I'm seeing now. Here we go. So you should see my browser again. These are backup codes. These are backup codes that are generated. Well, you can see my phone number, but that's fine. What you'll want to do is print these backup codes out or store them somewhere safe, because when you turn on two-factor authentication with providers, if you lose your phone, if you lose the way that you generate that code and you get locked out of your own account, providers will not re-enable access for you because they will consider you to be an attacker. So keep these codes safe somewhere. All right, so I've turned on two-factor authentication. I've set a backup method. I have my recovery codes. Security keys are hardware keys that you can plug into your laptops. I highly recommend security keys. They are the most secure way of turning on two-factor authentication. They will only work with the sites that you're supposed to be trying to log into, and you will know if they're stolen. It's something physical that you have. If you can't use a physical security key, or if that's too onerous, use an app, two-factor authentication app, and then as a last resort, use text messaging. So I've turned on two-factor authentication. Where possible with your services, you want to set up a backup email address. This is a work account, so I can't show you that to you here. This is a business account, but on a lot of our personal accounts and a lot of personal accounts for other service providers, you can set up a backup email address in case your primary email address is ever compromised or you lose access to it. Another thing I like to do is come in from time to time and look at the different devices that are syncing with my accounts. So you'll see here a list of devices that have logged into this account, and look for suspicious devices, or at the very least, remove old devices that you're no longer using. When you remove a device here with Dropbox, I can actually tell Dropbox to delete all of the files off of that device. So if you've lost a device, or you've stopped using a device, the next time it comes online, all of your data gets deleted. A lot of service providers will offer that as well. You'll want to look at what apps you've connected to your account. And I just want to take a moment here to just highlight that there are a lot of third-party apps out there that integrate with your, with Gmail, with Dropbox, with the different services that you use out there. Be generally suspicious of these apps, especially if they are free. You don't know how good the security of that app developer, how good the security of the app is, and how good at security that the app developer who designed this app is. You also don't know if they're just outright hostile. So I only connect apps that I have researched and trust to my various accounts. And the risk is, if you connect an app to your account, in many cases that app has full access. For example, if you connect an app to your Gmail account, it'll very likely have access to all of your emails. And so if an attacker wants to attack your Gmail account, they can now just go and attack this app instead, and then exfiltrate or pull all of your emails out of your account and monitor your email communications. So you want to come in here, look at connected apps, remove any that you're not using, and yeah, just be very, very, very careful about what apps you do connect. And then finally, actually, I'll give you a good example of a hostile app. There was an app called Unroll.me that a few years ago, a lot of people were using. It was supposed to help you like unsubscribe and manage your inbox. And it turned out that the developers of Unroll.me were basically just harvesting data. They were looking at emails. They were capturing keywords. They were creating profiles of people. They were doing some really, really what I consider inappropriate things with the access that you had granted them to your email account. And you just never really know. So keep the number of apps you have small that are connected to your accounts. And then finally, I talked earlier about sharing accounts. We see this a lot at Dropbox, and it goes badly very quickly. if you start sharing what's supposed to be an individual account with multiple people, a lot of the security protections that are in place, for example, alerting you when someone logs into your account or enabling you to actually turn on two-factor authentication, a lot of those security controls go away because you can't use them since multiple people are logging in. Strongly encourage you. A lot of our security is designed around the assumption that it is one person accessing one account. So that's just some of the best practices for account security that are generally applicable. Some best practices for securing your data once you secure your account. And again, account security is about preventing unauthorized access to your account. Data security is about preventing unauthorized access to your data. So what you want to do is when you're sharing data, when you're sharing a file, when you're sharing, just different content, there's a couple of ways you can share. You can, with Dropbox, you can just send someone a link, right? You can generate a link and send it out, and now anyone with this link can look at this file. What you want to do with sensitive data is look for sharing settings, and again, look for this across the different services that you use. With Dropbox, I can set a password, and then only people who have both the link and that password can access it. I can set an expiration date. So if I only want this file shared for a day or a week, and then I want to be confident that it's no longer out there, it's no longer being shared, I can do that as well. For some accounts with Dropbox, you can disable downloads. That's helpful if you don't want people downloading your data, but I think at a minimum, you want to look to set sharing passwords, and you want to set an expiration date for your most sensitive data. I just want to call out that some of these features are not available with our free accounts or other free accounts that are out there. You likely have to pay to be able to turn on these features. And then finally, a link is great if you're trying to just quickly send someone a file. The problem with links is they can be reshared. And even if you set a password with the link, if you don't trust the person you're sending the link to and the password to, they can go turn around and share that with other people. If you want to explicitly share with people, there are generally methods to do that. In our case at Dropbox, if you want to explicitly share data with someone and not just send them a link, you can create a shared folder. And then you can type in the name of the person that you'd like to share with. So if I put in Rajan at Dropbox.com here, you can only my Dropbox account and my Pied Piper account will be able to work on this data together. So to sum all of that up, make sure you're putting additional controls as you're sharing data. Most companies typically offer additional sharing controls like password expirations and passwords and expiration. And then if you're sharing with one person specifically, look for sharing controls that allow you to just share with that one person and don't share in a way that that person can reshare. And Sergio, I'll hand it back to you, I guess, to talk a little bit more about some of the tools here.
Yeah, before I dive into the tools, I just want to tell a quick story. I used to use a Google spreadsheet extension that was good for cleaning my spreadsheets, my data, right? But after I have been using that for a while, I got a pop-up message saying that it needed 100% access to my Google Drive, so it could see whatever was in there, edit and add stuff and delete it. Like I would give like a super admin permissions to that extension. Of course, I didn't accept it, but I mean, a lot of people find it useful. It was a very useful application, and I wonder how many people like really accept that, giving full permission to a not very good, trustworthy tool to operate within your documents. So that was really sketchy, and I don't use that tool anymore. I just do other stuff to clean my data. But no, you should mind everyone that asks full permission to your stuff, as Rajan said. I'm gonna share my screen here as well. I'm gonna show a toolbox I built specifically for this webinar. Can you see the tools here? The Vote logo here is that the screen I'm sharing?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So let me put this stuff here. Okay. So I put this tool together for you guys, this toolbox for you guys. Basically, it's a lot of the tools I use now or have used before that I like. I'm not gonna go over every single tool with you guys because there are a lot of them, but they're divided in a few steps. There's privacy and security, web browsers and search, and documents and data, right? So the first category, privacy and search, we mentioned Signal and ProtonMail, but there are some tools that are useful to use. For instance, EXIF Cleaner, which you can clear the metadata from images and videos and PDF documents. Like metadata is everything that you cannot see in a document, but it's there, like when was created, who created, and a lot of other kinds of data that sometimes you want to mask that or even erase it. So I like that tool a lot too, when I'm going to share some documents that someone share with me and I'm not sure if they clean their metadata out of it. So that's a good thing to clear. There's a very good example about it. A US government employee shared with Intercept, like the website, the investigative website. They shared with them a document, a government document, a private government document, classify it. And the journalists there at Intercept did not clean the metadata out of the document. And the government was able to identify the source. So that was like a big case of how metadata can be used to breach your sources, to find your sources. So you should be extra careful, and that's a tool that can help you. There's also this website, it's called Have I Been Pwned, which is very neat for you to check what happened to yourself. If I put my email in here, I know what the times my email has been compromised somehow. My email was part of 2 breached websites. One of them was, I think my browser is blocking this stuff, so let me unblock it. But yeah, so this tool allows you to know if your data has been breached somehow. Let me try it again. So it's good for you to keep track and how compromised are your communications sometimes. Well, it isn't showing here, but I know it was a photo application, was kind of Flickr. I forgot the name. 500 pixels. I had my email ready there and it leaked to someone. About VPNs, as Rajan mentioned, I use NordVPN, which is a good fair price VPN service. I like that. They're really good. They never let me down. They update their client software all the time. So it's pretty neat. It's very easy to install in your cell phone or your desktop. But there is also Outline, which is from Jigsaw. It's a Google company. And it lets organizations provide safe access to the internet, So you can create your own VPN service, or you can use there for, I guess, $5. It's a good VPN service as well. Another one that I really enjoyed as well is Private Bean, which you can share encrypted documents with people. So I can just come here and type, this is a webinar, right? And I can password protect it. I'll just put 123 password here. And I just can send this to someone, right? And I can get this link over here, and I need to use the password 123 and decrypt it. This is a webinar, you see. This is from privacytools.io, which is very reputable. They're very cool enterprise organization. I guess they're non-profit, and they really know their stuff about privacy. And with this tool here to share private stuff, it's very minimalistic, and it doesn't go to any server. It's encrypted. It goes to a server, but it stays in the browser in your end. So people would need like a key to open that. It's not that your message goes to a server. It goes encrypted there. So it's pretty neat to use. Around web browsers and search, you can see I'm using Brave, which is a web browser based on Chrome, but it has a lot of security layers in it. It basically has like a lot of shields where you can see who is tracking you. If I go, for instance, to the New York Times website, I can see what kind of crawlers or metrics the New York Times website is using against me, or not against me, but you know, what do they have here? They have a lot of stuff here to you know, to track your browsing history, cookies, and whatever. And Tor, with Brave, you can just shut it down. So it's a very neat browser, and it works as well as Chrome because it's based on Chrome, right? Which is a neat service, a neat web browser. Of course, there's Tor as well, which is more hardcore to protect privacy and stuff. So if you really absolutely need, like Brave would be like a day-to-day kind of browser for you to use. But if you really need some privacy and turn on your VPN and do all those kind of security layers, you're gonna use Tor. It even blocks a lot of JavaScript from websites, you know, to prevent people from accessing your browsing history and stuff. And for search, there's Quant that I really like. I try to make it my default search mechanism, but it's really good. But you know, I decided I'll stick with Google for now because I can reach more stuff, especially government data. But it works as well as any other browser for most of the time. You know, you can find New York Times website really easy here and stuff. And there's Cirx, which is from privatetools.io as well. It's very basic. It doesn't have plugins or it doesn't have anything other than, you know, indexes. But if you want to do some private searches, that's a good tool to use. And finally, the documents. There's a lot of document tools here. Rajan talked about Dropbox paper a little bit, how you can create documents in there. But I really recommend of those. I really recommend Workbench, which is for data journalists, professionals, and I recommend Standard Notes, which is like really neat tool and private, and it doesn't keep stuff in their server. It's basically end-to-end. So you download their application and the data stays in your computer. And when you put it in your cell phone, you need to keep them both connected so you can share the data between two of them. It's kind of a hassle, of course. You don't have it available 100% of the time, but it's really secure and it's really good. And you can pay for it if you want some of the extensions, which makes it a little easier to use, but it's free for the basic application. It's really good to use. And a Workbench, of course, that you can, it's basically a Excel with more resources. And for now, it's free as well. It's very secure. You can share documents and stuff. So that's my take on tools. But every tool that is here, I have used it before, and I like them. You know, Of course, I'll not 100% vouch for every one of those tools because, you know, you never know. But, you know, I like them. They are secure enough for me, and I use them a lot.
All right, awesome. I think we have time for one more quick question that we got from one of our participants, and it has to do with, you know, your digital presence. You know, a lot of us have created profiles all over the internet with, you know, whatever the service may be. So the question is, how do I clean up existing passwords and profiles if, you know, you don't want to use them anymore?
Oh, that's a tricky one. That you should keep track of this stuff and just go there and delete it. So yeah, I think there's no other way. Rajan mentioned the Enroll Me app, which wasn't very trustworthy.
So no like streamlined process out there or technology?
Not that I'm aware of, you know. Yeah, I just go there and delete the stuff I don't want to use.
Yeah, so there's a couple things you want to do, right? It's not just about the apps you use. There's a number of you do have to go to all these accounts individually and log into them and delete them. A lot of services now, because of European law, have a streamlined way that they've implemented to ask them to delete any data they have on you, including your account. But you have to go to their website and find it. I also highly recommend, there are sites that aggregate data about you online. So if you just type in your name into Google, you'll see a number of sites come back that say, hey, do a background check on Rajan Kapoor, get Rajan Kapoor's credit history. Go to each one of those sites and opt out. By law, they are required to allow you to opt out of being tracked by them, but you have to go to each site and do it. So I recommend doing that as well. Do a Google search on yourself from time to time, see what comes back, look for anything concerning. But yeah, if you've spent the last few years, like the rest of us, creating accounts all over the place, you'll want to go and shut them down. And you want to make sure, absolutely want to make sure you're not reusing the same password across all of these different sites and the currently active services that you use.
All right, awesome. Well, we're running out of time. So first of all, thank you both, Rajan and Sergio, for joining us today. I think speaking just for myself, I can say this is, you know, super helpful, and I have a lot to do now. But I just want to give you each just a couple minutes if there's any last closing remarks you would like to share.
Actually, sorry, there's one more thing. We didn't talk about browser plugins today. Again, be careful what browser plugins you use. These are apps that run within your browser. Those plugins will have access to everything you do in that browser. So just be very careful before you install a browser plugin. But beyond that, thanks again for inviting me to come and speak with you today. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to put my email address into the chat. Please reach out to me with any other questions you might have, and please keep up the great work of reporting facts and helping the rest of the world understand what's going on.
I'm sorry, my dog was barking here, so I put it on mute. So yeah, thank you guys for listening, and thank you for your questions. I really hope we helped you guys learning a little bit more about security. 1 hour is not enough to talk about the whole world of security and stuff, but you can reach me out through email or Twitter, and let me know if you have any doubts. And please feel free to use the toolbox I sent you guys. There's a link in the comment box. And thank you very much, ICFJ, David, and Taylor, and Rajan, and everyone in IGNet as well.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again to both of you, and thanks to all our participants and everyone who tuned in for this. Like we mentioned earlier, keep your eyes out. We'll have a recap posted on IJNet where we'll include these tools and some of these tips that Rajan and Sergio shared with us. And also keep your eyes out for a survey that we'll be sending around. And you can expect to see the full recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel, and we'll include it in the recap on IJNet. So again, stay safe, and thanks for watching.
All right, guys.
Thank you.